This episode should be kind of interesting because it's going to be the first time that we do a non-story mission. That should prove interesting because at least the first thing that should be known about non-story missions is the fact that they, oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. Whoops. We've got this interesting man. I'm gonna use Mew for this one because I think it'll be an excuse to use the character. So we are now being introduced to Yoyo. Yoyo's an interesting character. Kind of a useful one, if you want to use him. He's unlocked by completing noise reduction, which is the Benten-Cho Mission 3. He comes with his own set of graffiti, like just about every other character. The first of which we're gonna see now. Small size graffiti, Yo-Yo Baby by Yoyo at number 9. His large size graffiti is Yo 3D at number 43. And lastly, his extra large is Spirit of the Art by Vandalism at number 77, getting right to the point. Yo-Yo is interesting in that they use the gum type spray pattern. 12 to 6 counterclockwise, 6 to 12 clockwise. 12 to 12 counterclockwise, 12 to 6 clockwise. 6 to 6 counterclockwise, 6 to 12 clockwise. 12 to 6 counterclockwise, 6 to 6 clockwise. 6 to 12 counterclockwise, 12 to 6 clockwise, 6 to 12 counterclockwise. 12 to 6 clockwise, 6 to 6 counterclockwise, 6 to 6 clockwise. 6 to 6 counterclockwise, 6 to 6 clockwise, 6 to 6 counterclockwise. Alright, we got stats coming up now. Yo-Yo is basically gum again, but with a different set of tricks and a much higher technique stat. Yo-Yo doesn't have much in the way of health or too much in the way of spray cans, but has an exceptionally high graffiti stat and a higher technique stat than gum. Yo-Yo's forward airs are 720 and 1080. His reverse airs are the same thing. His forward grinds are Makio, Farside Makio, Royal, Backside Royal, Soul, and Farside Soul. His reverse grinds are Alley-Oop Makio, Farside Alley-Oop Makio, Alley-Oop Soul, and Farside Alley-Oop Soul. His forward verts are 900 and 1260. That's a lot of spin, my guy. And his reverse verts are the exact same thing. So Yo-Yo is also interesting in the way you unlock him. He's not the typical way of unlocking most characters in that you just follow them, do what they do, that sort of thing, do the tricks that they do, copy their moves. Yo-Yo, you're actually racing to a specific point. The level is not completely open, so you do have to follow a somewhat specific route, and you have to beat them to the spray point and at least pick up one can before they do. The spray point will always be size small in every level, so you only need one. The spray cans are also usually pretty close to where you're going to be spraying and are almost fully consistent across every version of the game. These missions are kind of fun in that you're just racing someone else to the finish line, although the AI is kind of weird and both for you and against you in this. Like, it's quite difficult to lose these. You'd have to have messed up a fair bit on these missions in order to have lost. However, it is still possible to lose, so just try and stay ahead of the AI where possible. And with that, we've unlocked Yo-Yo. Now you might be wondering, if Yoyo is technically an explicitly better version of Gum, why don't I just use Yoyo instead of Gum? And the answer is I'm habit driven. So instead of doing a story mission, we're going to do Jet Graffiti, which you can replay as many times as you want, which means if you don't get a jet rank on the first try, you're all good. We're gonna be looking at some new-ish stuff here. Subway and train line, small graffiti, skate puppet the fool at number 26. Followed by, oh, it's Haze again, all across the globe at number 27. He has a lot of graffiti in this game for some reason. Next up, we've seen this one before, Make Your Mark by Graffiti Terrorists at number 59. And we're gonna see the next one for a second time. Hip Hop Festival by Japan Crew at number 93. Those final two in this set can technically be obtained earlier, but I find it's better to obtain them in either Jet Graffiti or the next missions in Benten-Cho. Or the next mission specifically in Benten-Cho, which comes up later in the game, but you have access to the whole level in both Jet Graffiti and the next Benten mission. So for all intents and purposes, you might as well just grab them now if you're gonna do the Jet Graffiti. What I think is worth noting about these missions that I'm doing, the non-story ones, in terms of 100% completion, technically, you don't actually have to do these missions. Now, if you're gonna do like a true 100% of the game, where you're just doing everything there is to do, and doing it as well as you can, getting the max scores on everything, yeah, you have to jet rank stuff like Jet Graffiti, which, if you saw the score number for this, is quite a high score number, because you have every section of the level that we've seen before and more, with stuff to spray and places to do tricks. And a mildly lenient time limit. I say mildly because you'll probably use up the whole thing. So we're gonna have to travel back and forth between levels several times here, because this one is just... I find Benten is one of the harder levels to actually create a decent route through for Jet Graffiti and the later missions, because it's just... the main place where you get cans is like in 1 or 2 spots. The straightaway and Geki Jomai being the primary one. And going back and forth to preserve your time just doesn't really happen unless you plan in advance, which you're not going to be able to do on your first time through the level. I do, however, find Jet Graffiti fun, because it just takes the stuff from the regular missions and you don't have to deal with enemies. You just have to deal with traffic. Which is not the most fun thing in the world, but it is better than dealing with helicopters throwing missiles at you. So I'm not going to complain that much about it. Did I just get hit onto the platform? Alright, I guess that works. Once you get to a certain point, once the levels open up enough, there are areas that aren't necessarily covered in the main missions. That's not true for every level. In fact, I'm pretty sure Ben 10 is the only level in the game where that's true. And why, for completion's sake, I find Benten-Cho a little annoying. The subway area is technically locked off until, like, Jet Graffiti, which is an area we'll be seeing later, and is just it's a subway line that you can grind the rails on and do wall rides on the walls. I think it's interesting that they have it. You could go the whole game without seeing it, and if you weren't 100%ing the game, you more than likely would go the whole game without seeing it, because you wouldn't know it was a connector between 2 areas, but it is. So if you're not super confident about the score you're gonna get from graffiti alone in this level, you can use the score, the trick loop in this section of the level to get yourself some extra points. However, that will take up quite a bit of time, so you want to be careful when doing that, because if you use too much time, you won't have enough time to get all the graffiti. Of course, as is the case with the story missions, you only need to spray the red graffiti, but you should also spray the green ones because extra points. Of course, it does depend on which characters you prefer to play. If you prefer to play a high graffiti character like I do, then spraying the green stuff is basically necessary. But if you're more focused on like spamming trick lines and stuff, it's not a big deal. I think at this point I'm going back and forth because one, I will continue to, and I have run out of cans for this section of the level, so I have to keep replenishing them, but I'm also trying to get the graffiti souls on the train line, which is technically a part of Gekki-Jo Mai, just a part of the level that I didn't get the graffiti souls on earlier, which is why they're included here, but I also kind of consider the train line a separate area to Gekki-Jo Mai, depending on definition, because it's more of a transitionary area. It's weird, but for the sake of categorizing graffiti soul locations, I figured I need a way to chunk this information into things that are more manageable, because if I was just like, this graffiti soul is here, this is here, here's the next one, here's the next one, here's the next one, that would get overwhelming and nobody would remember where any of them are, and then you'd just be like, what's the point? If I can organize them in a way that shows you where they are by area and chronologically, what they are, what they do, so on and so forth, it just becomes easier. I don't even know if I'm done with the Highway 0 section of the level yet. Quite honestly, I don't have a... Oh good, I'm getting the graffiti souls. I don't have a particularly great route for this area of the game, or for Jet Graffiti. Like, Benten-Cho Jet Graffiti is the most difficult thing in the game for me. With some minor exceptions, I'm sure there are some things that are just difficult by way of tedium, but in general, Benten-Cho Jet Graffiti tends to be the hardest thing for me. On the bright side, it does give me an excuse to spray a bunch. I find the spray mechanics in this game bizarrely fun. An interesting thing to note about the PC version, which is what I'm playing on, you can actually use mouse and keyboard, which is weird because it's a console game. But surprisingly, I actually prefer the PC controls to the controller controls. I've played both, and I've probably ended up playing more hours with the controller just in recording for this game, but for the entirety of this PC playthrough, I will be using mouse and keyboard because it gives me a little bit more precision, and it seems like that would be a detriment for spraying, given that you would have to use 4 keys for spraying circular motions. I actually find it easier. Like, if you practice, it can be easier and way faster, which is probably, among many other reasons, loading times, graphical improvements, draw distance. I don't know if I said load times, I think I did. And just general content, why the PC version is speedrun over most other versions of the game. Technically, you can get a shorter run, I think, on the original Japanese Dreamcast release, but the PC version is generally the most played. This game doesn't have the biggest, like, speedrun scene in terms of leaderboards on speedrun.com or anything like that, but it still does exist and people are improving their times, and there are some really impressive runs of the game that just put this gameplay to shame. However, it's kind of hard to find, like, 100% runs of the game where they're getting every character, every graffiti soul, stuff like that. I would love to see how fast you could beat the game like that, because I managed to beat this game in an okay amount of time, especially in subsequent playthroughs, because I played this more than once for this series. But I'm not a speedrunner. I don't have the discipline. So it would be interesting to see. What happened to the audio? Why did the voice line cut out? Something that I'm going to also try and make a version difference. Like, I'm going to try and catalog the version differences between versions of the game as well, which I realize is a fairly large undertaking, seeing as there are 5, technically 6 different versions of this game. But there's a decent amount of differences between them, and I'm invested enough in this game to actually want to do that. So, for instance, just as a small example, the voice lines in this game are different between the English and Japanese versions, but not in ways you would expect. So, for instance, Professor K's voice lines are always in English, no matter what version, Japanese or English, you play, because those are the 2 major versions. I can't speak to the other languages in the European versions, because I haven't played in those other languages, but for the, like, main popularized versions of the games, Professor K will always speak in English. But character voice lines, like playable characters and whatnot, they have different voices between the original Japanese Dreamcast release and every other version of the game, which is kind of a pattern. There's a lot of stuff that was just specific to the Japanese Dreamcast release that's not in the other things. I am going to make a full video about the larger version differences and things I found interesting about that. But it's kind of, I don't think weird is the right word to use as to why some of those changes were made, because, like, in Jet Set Radio, in both English and Japanese, none of the characters really say any words except Professor K and the people on the radio. It's just kind of weird, the choices that were made for translation and hiring voice actors for a localization, or a dub, as it were. I think at this point I'm getting closer to being done with the level, because we went through the sewers and got the graffiti souls in there. I was actually fairly lucky with the sewer bit, because normally it takes me a lot more tries to get that, both graffiti souls in there, because they're kind of difficult to line up the grinds and the wall rides in order to actually reach those souls. We've gone over every area of Benten-Cho now, so that also means that at this point the video categorizing graffiti by location for Benten-Cho specifically will be released, because we've seen everything. If there's nothing else to show, I can release the full thing, or at least that's my attitude towards it. Because, like, I don't want to... I want these to be in a decently sequential order. Or at least to the best they can be, with a brain as scattered as mine. Yeah, we don't have much further to go. So this area of the map, again, unofficially referred to as Chinatown, is the only other spot in Jet Graffiti, other than the straight area in Gekijomai that has spray cans. I think they do it just for the sake of time, like to make the mission appear harder. Spreading the cans out, I mean. They spread the cans out, I think, to make the missions seem harder than they actually are. If you use a character that has a higher max spray can amount, it's not as difficult. It's just scoring is more of a concern with them, especially for something like Jet Graffiti, because most of your points are going to come from the graffiti that you spray. Oh, there's also some graffiti in the train line, or there's some spray cans in the train line, I should say. Surprised I didn't... I almost never remember that. I'm gonna try and make a quick shortcut back to the other section where I have the remaining sprays. If I mess up the jump, I'll probably take the long way. Nope, all good. So this area of the level almost has a good loop. I haven't been able to figure it out. Perhaps later in the game we'll see me try and do a good trick loop, but if you wanted to get points in here, if you were finishing up the sprays in here and didn't have enough points to get the jet rank, you can get some decent points, albeit a little bit slower than the Highway 0 section. Also Highway 0, in case I didn't mention, not a confirmed title for the area. It's just one that the community uses, like with the Chinatown name for this.